And the big difficulty is this. I want to find a method whereby I can change my consciousness. But therefore to improve myself. But the self that needs to be improved is the one that is doing the improving.
How's it going, everyone? It's Carpo here. I'm sitting at the driver's seat of my bus. Figured it'd be a good place to do a video because I usually make it in the back there, but I'm sitting here because I'd like to be driving right now down to my local, my regional Burning Man event, which is called Soak. I mention it every year, probably for the last 7-8 years that I've talked about it on my videos. Every May I'm like, oh, I'm going to Soak, and then I come back and I make a video about the event. And it's a very small event, and it's a place where I can kind of just go meet like-minded people and just hang out for the weekend, no obligations. And I won't go into the details, but basically the tickets that go up for sale, there's only like 1,500 available, and in the last couple of years they sold out in like 5 minutes. So I was sitting there ready to refresh my browser. I had my buddy help me so he could, in case I didn't get mine, but I somehow hit the wrong amount of tickets. You can only order 2 at a time. I was getting too hasty. Anyway, missed it. Basically, I probably wouldn't have got them anyway, but this was kind of the last minute flash sale, and I was really hoping I could go to this event because it's something that I've been wanting to, something I go to every year. It's like my thing. And I didn't get tickets. And it was funny because just a few minutes before, like maybe half an hour before they went on sale, I was out in the backyard. And my son and I have been looking for a 4-leaf clover for a long time, on and off. And I was walking past this group of clovers, and I looked down. The first one I looked at was a 4-leaf clover. It was so out of the blue that I thought, well, they must be a different strain of clover. But nope, couldn't find another one. I found the 4-leaf clover I'd been looking for, like not an hour before these tickets went on sale, and I still lost out. And, I just kind of laugh at stuff like that, because I don't take it too seriously. I don't know, the kind of the luck thing, or fate, or whatever you might call it, karma, the idea that somehow things are going to pan out because I saw these signs or whatnot. And I've been through some interesting times in my life where I kind of was delving into these types of practices, looking for signs, looking for numbers, or recurring themes or numbers to try to understand what the universe was telling me. And in the end I came down to the realization here, that which I'm about to share, which is the main point of this. Trying to read numbers and letters and scrying and looking to the future, all this stuff, it's all bogus in my opinion. What really matters is reading your emotions in your heart. And often people will go to extreme lengths to try to read kind of how they're feeling, to try to understand the world around them. So to give you an example, I guess, we know when something just doesn't feel right. When we just like, oh, this isn't going to work out. But sometimes it does work out anyway, and our thoughts are wrong, right? Or sometimes we might think, oh, this is the person that I'm going to love for the rest of my life. And somebody gets married, and then they ignore all the warning signs where they're constantly yelling at each other, or whatever it might be, in denial of the reality, but creating this idea that everything's just fine. We do that in our lives with all kinds of things. We humans have the ability to really look at the glass half full and get over some of the bullshit. That is a priceless gift that we have. So, in other words, when the tickets, when I realized I wasn't getting tickets, and I probably wouldn't get some, I said, well, I'll go on the ticket exchange if I can find some. That's fine. But it's complicated because I have to get an RV pass, and those are very limited because I won't go without my school bus. So instead of sitting there worrying about it, complaining, I went on the thread to leave my comment, and everybody was just, how could this happen? Oh man, this was bogus, or was this even a real sale? People were getting mad because they lost out. And it's like, these are the responses that people have when they feel like when they lost the chance to do something that they really wanted to do. Instead, I was sitting there trying to think, what should I do instead? I'll go camping. Maybe I'll just take the bus up for a couple days by myself and go canoeing, or something like that. Try to find an alternative. Instead of just complaining and complaining about the way that things are. And that's something I've really found a valuable asset in life. The first off, there are no negative emotions, okay? Only emotions that push us or help us understand ourselves. Life is tough for everyone. Let me just say that when you're younger, especially if you're a teenager. Any teenagers might think that you get to a certain stage in life and all of a sudden you just understand things. Oh, you got it figured out, or you've got your system in place. I guess for maybe other people that does happen, but for a person who's always learning, you're never finished. And each year you discover that something you thought was true before may not be. Some of the ways you felt about things may change, and that's okay to move along with that. But our emotions help us understand that. Perhaps we're anxious or sad about something that once brought us a lot of joy. Here's an important key. Don't compare our insides to others' outside. In other words, we should never compare ourselves to the image of how happy we think other people are, or how lucky we think other people are, or the people that we think their lives are just working out for them and they never have any problems. The extreme opposite of that is the victim that's always complaining, but that's a different story. But the pendulum of emotion swings back and forth, and it kind of helps to, if you have emotional intelligence, and I've spoken about this a few times before, it's something that I've found such a valuable asset to understanding the world, is to understand our emotions and how we react to the world. The world may not change for us, but our emotions about it can change. The way we react to things can change. And if we're getting angry or frustrated all the time, then we need to step back and look at our own behavior, perhaps something that isn't right with our lives right now. And often we want to blame it on something else, the system, or our parents, or our boss, or whatever it may be. There's always a scapegoat for that. But really looking inside and saying, our emotions are our own. Even people in some of the worst situations, they can find a way to deal with it by thinking properly. So emotions, you can think of them as red flags. So anxiety, I've had a lot of people ask me, how do you cope with anxiety? And I say, I used to have a lot in my early 30s. And then I started looking at the big picture. Look around and say, is this really as big a deal as it seems? And what's the worst that could happen? And of course you don't want to delve into, the worst that could happen is what? You die, go to prison. I mean, a million things could happen. But when you have just a general anxiety, learn to cope with it, but don't try to fight it to the point where we ignore it. Those anxieties help us realize we need to get things done. We need to do this, or we need to get away from this situation. And once we deal with that, usually the anxiety will go away, for the most part. But what do? We try to numb our emotions with drugs and alcohol. And some of these drugs, the medicated people, it's funny because we always look at when I was growing up as a pot smoker, people would always, point the finger as, oh, pot, just trying to hide from your emotions or get wasted. And I always thought, it's interesting. I smoke a little and I enjoy it, but it wears off and I'm back to myself. Then as I got older and I started seeing some of these people that I grew up with were taking these high-powered pharmaceuticals, antipsychotics, antidepressants, anxiolytics, whatever they may be. And these were long-lasting, long half-life substances which they were taking consistently, meaning that they never were themselves. They never were sober. In other words, some of the shorter-acting drugs, like cannabis, when they wear off, generally you're back to yourself. But some of these drugs you just carry them with you and you continue taking them and you forget the self that you were. So it's just funny how we consider that okay because it's prescribed by a doctor. We talk about all the side effects and dangers of these medications. One of the biggest ones is hiding those emotions. The very thing that we're trying to do, right? If you're depressed, you're sad. If you're anxious, you're upset. You're trying to mask these emotions, and by doing that, it can help us to cope and get things done. Taking a few Valium can help us relax, over a few days to start maybe boost ourselves back and get back to normal. Just like a psychedelic journey will help me kind of reformulate my thoughts and ideas about life and get back on the horse. But not taking them consistently, I wouldn't want to, feel that way all the time. So, and when these emotions come, when we have them, it's best to just get it out. I read an article about cussing one time. It was talking about how cussing actually does help. It helps your anxiety level. It reduces anxiety by GPS turned on. It reduces your anxiety somehow. So cussing, the act of just going fuck after you stub your toe or something, actually reduces pain, and makes total sense. Probably releases endorphins. Just like running and screaming or laughing or crying, all these things kind of, release these different chemicals, cocktails within your body where, learning to identify those when they come up is key. Everybody knows somebody who gets angry at the slightest provocation and then just takes it out on someone and then carries that around with them all day long. Anger is not something we need to abandon. Anger is something we need to understand. If we find ourselves getting angry, we need to identify the source and find out why. And this is different from an anger problem. If you're carrying something with you, just some stupid argument you had for more than a day or two, I mean, you might have an anger problem. In other words, I've kind of tried to train myself to let go, to be able to just feel the emotion in the moment, be like, yeah, that's how I feel, yay, or fuck you, or whatever it might be, and yeah, and then move on. Just do it. Just move on. If you hold it in, it really does build, and then we can burst at the seams. So here's a rule of happiness. Happiness is the trip, not the destination. Anyone can say that. It means very little to someone who's unhappy or thinks they're unhappy. But realizing it's those moments that we grab onto where we're feeling our best. We have to acknowledge those. We fail to acknowledge those so often, and it took me a lot of training to be consistently aware of myself at all times. Seeing myself from the outside, being aware of the things I say, the things I do, the things I feel, and, where my happiness comes from, and hanging on to it while it's there. Having an ecstatic moment and then having a breakdown, the next moment you could, it's different, not bipolar style where you just can't control your emotions. That can be an issue. Personality disorders that have to do with those, they usually have to do with emotions and not being able to control them. Extreme laughter, extreme crying, or a lack of emotion completely. So these are our tools to understand the world. And there is a gray area, and I read something about this once that's often overlooked, and it would be called, I guess, the transition time between the good and the bad. In other words, we have some really good times, some really bad times. The transition time is when we feel normal, when we're swinging the pendulum the other direction. And the reason we don't notice the good times is because the good times are when we feel just average. Good doesn't mean you're ecstatic. That's the extreme, and you cannot live there. You can't live in this extreme happiness forever, because even people anybody who has tried, you end up finding something wrong with it. You get bored with it. It's almost like we can't live in that reality. This is why I laugh at the idea of an eternal heaven where everything's great and grand, and you live with everyone for eternity. How fucking boring could that be? I mean, really, it's the conflict that makes life what it is. So the gray area is important to acknowledge, and enjoying the present moment in that gray area is important. But sometimes we can't enjoy it, and having hobbies or things that interest us can be a very valuable asset in those times. I can't stress it enough. Hobbies, just something to distract our minds so we're not feeling like we're on repeat. And it's the small wins that teach us coping skills. The small wins, just a little, yeah, that worked out, and that worked out. What we're often, as humans, we're looking for a big win. We're saying, oh, I need to get this business going, or I'm going to win the lottery, or I'm going to get my windfall, whatever it might be. Your great invention, your big idea, but sometimes it's incremental. So we have an idea and we just kind of let it go because it's not great enough. And we let it go and it's not great enough. And it wasn't even until a few years ago where I really started writing down all my notes, all my ideas, everything for like the last 5 years. Whenever I have an idea or a series of thoughts, I take notes. And it's helped me immensely to go back and review those and say, oh, that's right. Just because you've learned something doesn't mean you retained it, doesn't mean you remember, and doesn't mean you can actually utilize it. So those little, articles and books I read about emotion and controlling our minds and helping us to understand our psyche a little bit better, those are the ones that I really want to retain, because it is the emotion that is with us all the time, that we're consistently dealing with. All the other things in life, that come and go, emotion is something that's constantly there. Hopefully, it should be, unless you're on one of those, SSRIs, a certain or an antipsychotic or something that completely numbs you. Although I should mention, alcohol does the same thing, only it's short-lasting because it numbs the pain for a while, and you wake up feeling twice as shitty. And let me say, while I'm at that, cannabis also has similar effects. I smoked cannabis for 25 years, and I used to think that it helped relax me. And now I find if I smoke too much, it makes me anxious, it makes me too worried about small things, and I'm starting to understand my own body chemistry, exactly what works for me, how to know my limits, and how to find my balance. And there's nothing wrong with consuming substances, in my opinion, as long as you do it, as long as you're not drinking alcohol at 9 in the morning and getting drunk and not getting anything done, because it's easy to fall into that. Even when I found myself having a beer at noon, like, whoa, that's something that I used to make fun of my friends for, But as long as you're aware of yourself and you're always acknowledging your own habits and your own feelings, then you can know and change your habits. And it gets harder as you get older to change your habits, believe me. Your thinking habits become so ingrained, you need to form new neural connections. And that's only done through acting a different way or thinking a different way. Neuroplasticity, your brain will rewire and the way your brain fires, your brain wires. There's a saying in neuroscience. And that's because that's how athletes learn, and that's how you get muscle memory, and your brain works with your body to do amazing things that humans can do. So speaking of that, a few of the things that can actually help us with our mood are really simple things that they always tell us. It's exercise, diet, good relationships, and having goals in life, things like that. But we don't do it because it's hard. It's hard to find the time to exercise properly or know what we should be doing. Sometimes the relationships that we're in, for a lot of people, they can be super toxic. And so everything else is going great, but they're being dragged down by their family or their friends or whoever it may be, roommates. People are very difficult, and we have to learn to cope with each other's shortcomings and strengths. Hopefully you're in a relationship where it's 1 + 1 is 3, because that's if you're in that kind of a relationship. But what matters the most is to be kind, not just to others. We hear that a lot, but to be kind to ourselves. We have to be honest with others. And it's funny, if you were to apply all the things that we're told to do to other people that are the right things to do, how many of those things do we apply to ourselves? We're told to say, please and thank you. We're told to be kind. We're told to share with others. We're told to not make people feel bad or talk bad about them. You might feel guilty if you make fun of somebody, but we'll insult ourselves without even thinking about it. No matter how on top of your game you may be, and no matter how egotistical you may be even, I know that all of us have insecurities. We have to. And I'm sure there's a few exceptions out there. A person would have to be a complete lunatic to not see faults within themselves, but they are out there. But for the most part, even the people who seem like they know what they're talking about, if they're truly honest, they will admit that we have ups and downs, that we all have insecurities, and that we're all working to just find a happy medium so we can live a happier life. It's really that simple. And so, to me, to part here, it's not about positive thinking. I've thought this over. It's about positive responding. Thinking only goes so far. We think of a lot of things. Positive responding is where it's at. And that means that we learn to respond differently to people, even the completely rude person. And that may mean completely different things for different people. For example, if somebody responds to you rudely, for one person, them working on their response may be, well, I tend to just lash out at people like that, so I'm going to try to have a calmer response and walk away. For another person, when somebody's rude to them, they may be the kind of person who's way passive and doesn't stand up for themselves. So for them, improving may be positive responding, may be standing up for who they are. So what it is figuring out our interactions with other people and how we can better be suited for that. If we push against it and just say, well, fuck everybody else, then we're the ones that are going to suffer. It's just the way it is. So as usual, as I said, happiness is a trip, not a destination. My only goal here really is just to discuss some things that I've found useful, and hopefully somebody else can as well. So thanks for watching, as always. Talk to y'all later. Be well, my friends. Be well. Take care of yourself. Respect yourself. Thanks for coming to Carpo's channel, yo.